In this video, I'm going to demonstrate calculating price and quantity variances both for materials and also labor. This is going to be very similar to one of your problem set problems. So first I'm going to look at the setup of the problem. Again, it's going to be similar, not exactly the same as your problem. And what we have here in this table here is the standard information, or what I thought I was going to pay or use for material and labor. We anticipated for every Zoom, and that's the unit that we're going to produce, that every single Zoom was going to require 6.4 pounds of material, and the cost per pound that we thought that we were going to pay for this material is $2.40. And what the standard cost is over here to the right, and I'll be honest, you're going to ignore that completely in your variance calculations, is just taking the number of pounds times the standard price per pound, and it calculates out to be an anticipated material cost for every finished Zoom of $15.36. Again, big hint, just ignore that final number in your variance calculations. Direct material, we anticipated that every single Zoom was going to require a quarter of an hour, or 0.25 hours, and we anticipated we were going to pay our employees $11.50 per hour. Again, if I took $11.50 times 0.25 hours, we anticipated every Zoom was going to require $2.88 of direct labor. Again, big hint, ignore that. Just pretend like that doesn't exist in our different variance calculations. So now we jump down to A, B, and C, and this is actual information. So the amount of material we purchased was 17,500 pounds, and the cost per pound that we actually paid for the material is $2.20. The number of finished units, or Zooms, whatever they happen to be, that we produced is 2,500. And the actual amount of direct labor hours was 475 for a total actual direct labor cost of 5,938. Now that we've got this set up, let's go ahead and move on and start doing our variance calculations. I'm going to start with the price variances. And it's important when working through these to take a look at this initial formula. Overall, we calculate a price variance by taking the actual quantity, whether we're talking about the actual pounds of material or the actual direct labor hours, times the difference between the actual price per unit and the standard price per unit. So let's go ahead and tackle the material price variance first. And again, the formula is just stated actual quantity times actual price minus standard price. Now, there's a lot of numbers swimming around over here on the left, and that's where I find a lot of times that students get lost in this because there's just a lot of information. So I recommend jotting down the 3 different variables that we have here. And let's start with actual quantity. What's the actual quantity of material that we purchased? It's going to be 17,500 pounds. They gave us that information. The next thing that we're going to go after is the actual price per unit, not the total material cost in a finished unit, but what is the price per pound in this situation of material that we purchase. The actual price per pound is $2.20. The next thing we need to look at is what was our standard price? What do we think that we were going to pay per pound of material? We look up here, and that's $2.40 per pound. Now that we've isolated all our 3 variables, it's fairly easy to execute this equation. Again, material price variance is actual quantity of 17,500 pounds times the difference between the actual price of $2.20 per pound times the standard price of $2.40 per pound. So if you look at this, we actually saved 20 cents per pound. We thought we were going to pay $2.40. We actually paid $2.20. Multiply that times the 17,500 pounds that we purchased, and we saved $3,500. It's actually a negative here that you notice that I left out. When you interpret your final answer, you don't list it as necessarily negative versus positive. How you interpret it is this favorable or unfavorable? And I know that a lot of times can be tricky for students. And I always recommend stepping back. Don't just think, is it negative? Is it positive? Does that mean favorable or unfavorable? But step back and think about it. If we thought we were going to pay $2.40 per pound and we only paid $2.20, we saved 20 cents. We're the buyer, that's a good thing. So this is going to be a favorable variance. Now, another thing you have to know for the chapter in terms of conceptual questions is who's typically responsible for this. But oftentimes for the material price variance, it's typically the purchasing manager. And what might have caused a favorable variance? Well, it might have just been very good negotiating skills. It might have been that we happen to be buying typically greater quantities, and so we're able to negotiate an overall price discount based on that, or we committed to a longer term contract. The other reason might not necessarily be something good. Our purchasing manager might have just decided to buy really cheap materials, and that might lead to some quality issues. So let's go ahead and move on. Now that we've calculated our price variance for materials, I'm going to do this in a little bit different order. I'm going to jump to number 2 and look at the price variance for labor. So I'm jumping between material and labor. Again, go to our basic equation of price variance is actual quantity times actual price minus standard price. The concept is the same for labor, but we just change the verbiage a little bit. It's not a price variance, it's a labor rate variance because we don't talk about paying employees in prices, we talk about paying them in labor rates. And the actual quantity stays the same. But again, instead of actual price per unit, it's actual rate per unit or actual rate per hour. Instead of standard price per unit, it's standard rate per unit or standard rate per hour. So again, same concept, just the terminology changes a little bit. So again, let's go ahead and execute this and set up the different variables. The actual quantity, the actual number of hours that we use to produce these 2,500 Zooms is 475 hours. The actual rate that we pay, do we have that listed anywhere? No, we don't. But we have enough information to calculate that. And keep in mind, this is actual rate per labor hour. We can calculate it by taking the actual dollars of total dollars of labor is $5,938 divided by the actual hours of 475 hours. And so our average actual labor rate was $12.50 per hour. So sometimes you have to calculate some of this information. So I'll list the actual rate is $12.50 per hour. What's the standard rate? Our standard rate's just listed up here above. We anticipated that we were going to pay $11.50 per hour. So again, let's go ahead and just start executing this. The labor rate variance is our 475 actual hours times our actual rate of $12.50 minus our standard rate of $11.50. If you look at this, we thought that we were going to pay $11.50. We actually paid $12.50 per hour. So we paid $1 more per hour. Take that $1 more per hour, multiply it times the 475 hours that we incurred to produce all of these Zooms, and our total labor rate variance is $475. Again, is this going to be, instead of plus and minus, let's think of this in terms of favorable or unfavorable. We're the buyer, we're the employer. We paid $1 more per hour than we thought we were going to pay. Is that a good thing or a bad thing? Well, on the surface, that's a bad thing. We're paying more per hour times our total hours, so we're going to go ahead and list this as unfavorable. Again, let's think about this. Who's typically responsible for this? Is typically going to be our production, between production and human resources. What could have caused us to have an unfavorable rate variance? Well, it might have been that we just were more generous and gave our employees a raise that we didn't necessarily anticipate. It might be a union environment and they negotiated a higher rate than we anticipated with their latest contract. It might have also been by nature of the mix of employees, like if we have different skill levels, and this is just an average rate overall anyway, that we might have used more experienced, more skilled, more tenured people, and again, paying them more per hour in this situation. Now I'm going to have a separate video. I've executed all the different price variances. I'm going to have a separate video just to shorten the length on the quantity variances.